Today, I'm honored to welcome Farya Barlas, a psychologist, trauma healer, and the creator of Homecoming to Self method. Farya's approach blends psychology, somatic healing, inner child work, and coaching to help individuals move from merely surviving to truly thriving. Drawing from her own transformative journey, she guides clients to reconnect with their authentic selves, break free from limiting patterns, and step into lives filled with purpose and abundance. And this episode truly encapsulates all of that. We really talk about what it means to bring back the human in business and what it actually looks like for women, especially, to sit down with themselves in a different way when they tackle things like marketing, messaging, scaling, selling, and even success, and what it genuinely means to be a person in the face of your own business. So let's dive in. Welcome to the Course Corrector Confidential, the podcast for course creators, service providers, and entrepreneurs ready to rewrite the LinkedIn rulebook. I'm here to help you show up your way with a strategy that reflects your voice, draws in your ideal audience, and actually converts. Tune in twice a month to hear from me and my guests on how you can show up knowing exactly what to do and what to say to get your message out there to the people who need to hear it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Course Corrector Confidential. We have another guest on today, Farya Barlas, and I am so excited to have her on because this conversation is going to be a little bit different from everything we've had on prior, and it's just going to be, as I mentioned to her before, flexing this muscle that I've had as a life coach that I don't normally get to as a marketer. So if you would love to introduce yourself, I would love to hear about your business, what you do, all of that jazz.
Hi, and thank you for inviting me. I'm Farya Barlas. I'm a chartered psychologist and trauma expert. My specialty is working with entrepreneurs, business owners, and basically service providers. I identify them as high achievers and working with them to identify their internal and invisible blocks to whatever it is, whatever goals or sort of success mark that they want to have for themselves, working with them to identify what's been blocking them. And so, yeah, I am also a business growth and success mentor, but I bring in my psychology background and the trauma expertise into this line of work. And yeah, I've seen amazing results.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, again, just kind of talking about the reason I really wanted to bring you on is because I think when it comes to visibility, and social media is a place where you have to be incredibly visible, and then on top of it, you have to sell, which I know is just, it takes work, and it's not just mental work, it's emotional work. And so I wanted you to come on and talk about, as a business mentor, what does it look like to tackle some of these issues? And before we even get there, I want to talk about what comes up for people, right? You're talking about like the high achiever. I'm thinking like high achiever syndrome and the burnout that we all hit eventually from doing entirely too much work. Or we're used to being straight A students, and then we don't have grades in the business world, so we're grading ourselves on a metric that doesn't exist anymore, and we're showing up entirely too much. But then we have worthy issues, or we don't feel enough, just all of this stuff that comes up. So I'm so curious what you've seen in your line of work and how that just plays out as business owners, as people in business, as entrepreneurs, all of that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you think about it, who we are in our business is the same person that we are in our relationships, right? So we will bring in the same patterns, programming, dare I say, insecurities into our relationship with our business. Because when we talk about our businesses, the work that we do, it doesn't feel, I mean, working with a lot of people in that field, it doesn't feel personal. It feels like it's something that, they love what they do, but they don't often recognize it as a relationship. And yet it is at least one of the most important relationships that we have. It is with our business. So then we bring in all these patterns, the programming, everything that essentially made us who we are today, we bring it into our business. But then when people think about scaling or wanting to expand, the last thing that they actually consider, at least in my experience, is who they are and their identity as that, on that level. So then a lot of people want to expand and scale with the same identity that got them to this place. And I always say that in order to, you cannot override your nervous system because it will become dysregulated because we are not used to that way of being or that reality, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned about visibility. There are a few things that comes up when, well, what I call trauma bond with our business, right? And one of them, one of them is visibility, and the other one is money trauma. And then, of course, the nervous system dysregulation when it comes to what we perceive as safety.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to point this out that firstly, it's not in your head. It's not something that, oh, I just don't like being in front of a camera or I don't like to be visible. If you think about it, in the past, especially women, it was not safe for us to be visible. So it's something that is in our biology. It's not a mindset thing that we can override. So that's the first thing to really, really understand. And then we have all these money traumas and traumas around what it means to have wealth, especially again as women. What did we understand about money growing up? What did we observe about, women having wealth and visibility? Because in my experience, and again, this is the whole kind of unconscious process that's taking place, but in my experience, a lot of women associate creating wealth with losing connection. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big thing for, well, I mean, we are relational beings, so connection is a very important thing. And then, of course, there is the fear of visibility. I mean, if you want to look at it on a kind of more simpler level, what it means is that we are putting ourselves out there to potentially be judged and be, our worst kind of nightmare, if you like. Any experiences we might have had in the past will get played out again in this dynamic. We don't see this as, okay, this is an offer or something that I have or a service that I have that can help somebody else. This becomes a way for us to measure whether we are good enough or not. And that's a very slippery slope because, once you enter that, and you do enter it, especially if you're not necessarily aware of all this process that goes on behind the scene. So it's not that you are broken. It's not that there is anything wrong with you. It's just that you're amazingly well equipped to protect yourself and to survive. The only issue is that your nervous system has not been upgraded to understand that, hey, it's not dangerous anymore. It's okay. We can create that safety and we can step into bigger things, bigger, more wealth, more visibility, and more success.
Wow. That's really, really amazing. And I think there's just like so many wonderful nuggets in there that you said that I really cannot wait to just dive into. I think when you were talking, what sort of came to my mind is, when we're talking about the subconscious, when we're talking about our brains, I think also it's really important to understand the science behind it. And I know that that's something you're really big into in terms of psychology and not mindset, right? Psychology, the science behind your brain, your nervous system, how everything is functioning together. Really, when we think about our brains, they haven't evolved very much from like the Neanderthal group fire saber-toothed tiger days, right? Instead, we're operating in a whole new world where like visibility or money is our new saber-toothed tiger, right? Instead, we're sitting here with this brain that understands what fear is and understands that, okay, in order to keep ourselves safe, we have to have that community because if we're isolated from the community, that means literal death, right? And while that isn't applicable today, our bodies still feel like that, right? And so I love what you said about wealth as losing connection because I think as women who are attempting to scale business or grow business or step into this new version of themselves as an entrepreneur, as a money-oriented business owner, right? Just as someone who wants to gain more wealth, the idea then of losing that connection feels like death. Like it's, you can't, I don't know. I feel like it's so then hard to rectify the situation, which is, I would love to talk about that as well. And then the other piece that I just think is amazing that you said is that it's not a mindset to override. And I want to talk about that too, because I think so often we look at our mindset and go, okay, we just have to push through. We have to get over it and it'll be fine. And I'm going to get to the next level. I'm going to scale in my business. I'm going to hit that identity crisis and I'm going to push through it and it's going to be fine because it's mindset. But no one ever takes a second to go, is it really mindset? It might actually be my body, right? So can you kind of there's two different things in there. Let's start with wealth, the connection piece. What does it look like to actually step into wealth without feeling like, our Neanderthal brains are going, oh my God, we're gonna die here.
I mean, yes, we are, firstly, one thing we need to understand is our body and our mind is not designed to make us happy. It's designed to protect us. And that's the most important thing. When we think about our mind is a very beautiful tool that we've got, but then we tend to identify with it a lot, right? So if we feel, for example, a bit nervous about, I don't know, about going to becoming more visible or wanting to talk about our business or you want to present something, you may feel the anxiety in your body, right? And then your mind picks that up and immediately goes into action to come up with all the right excuses as to why it's not the right time, why you shouldn't do it right now, or why this. So this is important because we need to separate the mind and the body. That's why. So it is that, we cannot override when our body goes into, for example, freeze or fight or flight. That's a real thing. It's biology. We are not making it up. It's not something that we can't even, see. It is actually our nervous system going into responding to a threat. Now, when I talk about these things and when I work with my own clients, the initial response is, well, that's not a threat. What I want is I love to be able to have more success or make more money or whatever it is that they desire. The problem with that is that obviously a lot of it is unconscious. Secondly, a lot of these programming is stored in our body. So when we are talking about, when you were actually referring to, okay, our system has not been upgraded. Actually, if you just even look at our grandparents or our ancestors, how they perceived wealth and money, I know that it wasn't a long time ago. We're not talking about the tiger days, we're talking about even like 100 or 50 or 60 years ago.
Mhm.
The role, I guess, of a woman was very different to what it is now. So if you were to go out there and create a lot of money and become super successful, I think the first thing that comes up for me is, firstly, you be isolated. You would have been isolated. Secondly, it's all about kind of, especially when it comes to relationships, there was a role, when it came to a romantic relationship. The whole point at the time of woman kind of was to have a different role to what they can have now. Let's just put it this way. So I know, for example, that I had a great aunt who she was a academic and she was very smart and very capable. But at some point, what I observed was that she had to pack up and come back home because that was what was required of her. And that's okay. That's if it was based on a choice that some people would make. But I think what I took away, what a lot of us took away, was that if we go into our world of creating wealth and having more success, we are not going to have all the things that we might want, i.e., I don't know, family,
Mm.
These are not the things that we consciously think about. It's important to differentiate that, because it sounds a bit almost ridiculous to say it out loud, because people would be thinking, well, of course, but I am talking about the unconscious programming that's been running through from our ancestors, our grandparents. So we are talking about intergenerational trauma here. It's not something that we are aware of. It's not something that we actively wake up and think about. It's something that our bodies, based historically, it registers as unsafe. It's not something that we consciously think as unsafe. It's very important to differentiate between the two, because then you might think, well, of course I don't think that. I mean, are you crazy? Of course.
Yeah, yeah.
But of course, this is something that our bodies have taken on as unsafe. And for as long, our body is, you cannot rationalize with your body. You cannot bring logic and rationale to your nervous system. You need to bring somatic safety to your nervous system. There's the difference. And when we are, and you see this, I see this, when people are being constantly encouraged to push through, hustle harder, become more visible, it's very difficult, because if you are being more visible from a dysregulated place, your messaging is going to be dysregulated.
Mm.
And the person that you're going to attract, or you're hoping to attract, will pick that up.
Mm.
This is how, so it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. If you want to have success without the burnout, I mean, burnout is the most common one, but there are so many different things. We only ever talk about burnout, but really, a lot of us have been operating in a functional freeze, in a way that you're not, you look like you've got it all. You look like you're smashing your
Yeah.
target one after another. But then I also see that they don't stop to actually celebrate or to embody that success. They just jump into the next thing, right? And because I've seen the other side a lot, what then happens is that they keep going, keep going. They don't get burned out because they have this ability, because they are ambitious people. They've created that muscle for themselves. But what then happens is that feeling of dissociation and
Mm.
emptiness. And that's something that I see also a lot. And I think people think, well, that just comes with being a business owner. It really does not.
Right. I mean, that even that in of itself is a limiting belief, right? Oh, these things just come with being a business owner. It's like, well, where in your operating system is that even coming from, right? I think that just points back to what have you witnessed time and time again, the intergenerational trauma. What did your parents teach you? What did your grandparents teach you? What have you learned from the outside world about business that then informs your decision that you know, feeling dissociated is okay. Feeling burnout is okay. Feeling like you're not enough consistently in your business is okay. Like that's actually not normal, right? And I feel like it has become such a normal because we are operating without bringing our subconscious into the present and actually examining it and making it conscious, right? Like you're having the ability to look at it, understand where things are showing up, and then actually knowing where to bring in that somatic work.
I want to kind of add something about trauma also, because when I talk about trauma, a lot of people already feel like, well, okay, this doesn't apply to me. And that's very important, because people are still looking at it from that perspective of, okay, it has to be PTSD with like severe, a big event or something. No, I've been in this world and I've been practicing as a psychologist for over 20 years. And within my practice and within sort of people around of me, I am yet to come across a person who hasn't had some kind of trauma in their background, whether it's attachment, whether it's emotional, it could be in any form. But it's, and that's why, especially high achievers,
Mm-hmm.
because there is something in all of us. I mean, of course, we all want to create, that's an innate need in us as human beings. But I think with high achievers, what sometimes happens is that they go into dissociation and kind of perfectionism, overwork, and it gets rewarded. Time after time, it gets rewarded because it just means more success. And every time I talk about the trauma healing and all this work, the somatic work, people think, oh, well, I don't want to lose my edge. And I think, well, actually, it's true because they think that it's that hunger that keeps them going.
Mm,
And I always say, well, actually, you've created success despite of that, not because of it.
mm,
So imagine what you can create in and how more aligned you can create that when you are regulated, when
yeah.
your system is aligned with that safety, when you've recognized some of this inner work. It doesn't have to be, and honestly, it doesn't mean that you have to be in therapy for years and years and years. I have done a lot of work to try to bridge these two worlds because I see that a lot. People either indulge in healing, and then that could go on for years and years and years. You don't create anything, you don't get into a relationship because you're healing, and you wait until you're healed. Well,
mhm.
then you'll be waiting forever. And I know that a lot of the times, and I mean that's a little, a little bit controversial maybe to hear, but the therapy world actually rewards that,
Yeah.
sometimes keeps people stuck in being. I always think, well, if you are in the process of healing and you're not taking action, then you're really using therapy, healing, or whatever as another form of dissociation.
Me and my
You
former co-host Linda Perry, we call that spiritual bypassing.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
true. You
it is.
cannot meditate your way out of trauma. You cannot, affirm your way out of the things that you need to pay attention to. And then on the other side, we've got all these high achievers, entrepreneurs, business owners, and business coaches that are in the world of saying, let's push through. Like what Trauma is not, it has nothing to do with us kind of thing. And of course, I'm not talking about everyone. I'm just giving a
Yeah.
example as to how these two worlds are disconnected. And I always say, you want more money, you want more success, then you've got to upgrade your identity. You cannot go into more with the same identity that got you this far. So actually, it's not just about healing. Healing is it's not the destination. It's just the foundation for
Hmm.
growth, success, and everything else. And I think this is what is not being talked about as much. And this separation is costing entrepreneurs, women mainly, their health, is costing them their well-being, but they're also the connection to themselves, their sense of satisfaction in life. And also it takes away their ability to dream about their desires because they're just constantly on.
Yeah, and I think like how often is also like for high achievers, I'm thinking specifically right now, how often is like that edge or the reward system that they're used to being used as like subconsciously an excuse to bypass that healing journey that is just the foundation, right? It's that first layer. It's doesn't even ultimately have to do with shifting the identity, which is, as you're saying, like of the key part to all of this when you want to like scale, when you want to continue achieving more in a healthy, regulated manner. It's like that spiritual bypassing almost shows up in like the excuses as well. And I just think that's so interesting. And I know I've done it too, where I've sat there and been like, well, I can't waste time on figuring out XYZ right now because I have to scale. I have to go do this in my business. I have a launch coming up. I have this. I have to get this marketing and messaging perfected and blah, blah, blah. But then the result of that is never what I want it to be because instead of tackling the issue, which was what was coming up around my basic foundation, dysregulation within my body. Instead of tackling that, I tackled everything else around it. And ultimately, I ended up with just like discombobulated business mess, right? Yeah, I think that that's so interesting.
People don't realize that it's not the next strategy that you need to reach.
Mm.
Of course, these are important. You need to know the things that you need to do. Of course, that's very valuable. But what you don't realize is that you actively block yourself. So you need to rewire your own programming and rewire your own unconscious patterns. Unless you do that, you without knowing, you will get in your way time and time again. And this is what I've seen for all of my adult life that I've been working with clients.
Yeah, and that's incredible. And I just think this is just amazing in the sense of like you're explaining what we all go through so succinctly as entrepreneurs, as women in business, especially. And yeah, where I really, really want to focus now is messaging because obviously I do a whole bunch of marketing stuff. That's what people listen, that's what people come here to listen for. So, how does all of this impact messaging? I know you've touched on it, but I really want to kind of dive into that discombobulated business mess, how my internal dysregulation really leads to an impact in my messaging, an impact in how I interact with clients, an impact in how I actually scale up and really tie in that identity piece.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's everywhere, right? And it comes up the most when we have to sell something, when we have to present something because we attach that to who we are rather than the service that we are providing. Of course, we do a lot of work to create that business, so it's important to us. But in terms of when you think about messaging, and again, I see this a lot where people hide behind, we've all been victim of that, myself included, right? Where we don't fully bring in our zone of genius, our magic. And that's the thing that others need. When you even think about marketing or when you think about putting a product out, the thing that lands for people to then want to invest in that is when they're able to see essentially themselves in that or to be able to benefit from that. But when we are not able to be fully, when we are hiding parts of ourselves, our messaging is going to reflect that. You cannot go and try to market parts of yourself. It's impossible. And if you also think about how we show up in when we talk about our offer or sometimes sales calls or however you talk about your offer, this is what I see again time and time over. And that is people attach, they do not see the other person in the room, or they do not see potentially the buyer and what they are going through, right? So they are so focused on attaching whether or not that person says yes or no to their sense of worthiness that they're not paying attention to that person. They're not able to hold the other person's uncertainty.
Mm.
And that's what sells. If you're able to sit with somebody, hold them in where they are in their uncertainty, because this is not about you. It's not about you being worthy or not. It's about the person thinking potentially whether or not they are worthy of this investment, whether they are worthy to invest in themselves. But we get so caught up in our own insecurities, we don't see that. We don't touch them or we don't connect with them on that level. So it then becomes about ourselves and how we can avoid our past traumas of rejection and potentially abandonment, right? But if we are aware of our own patterns, our own background, what kind of triggers us, what gets our nervous system into dysregulation, then we can actually work with that. So when we show up, we are regulated. So we can hold the other person's dysregulation, which is what we are supposed to do anyway. If in any form of providing any service, you have to be able to hold the other person's uncertainty. Otherwise, what will happen is that you're confirming the other person's trauma response without knowing.
Oh my gosh.
You're confirming that, yes, you are not worthy. Yes, nobody's going to be able to help you. Yes, this is going to be another program that you're not going to finish. See, this is all of their trauma responses. But we are so busy with our own things that we're not we're not able to hold that for them. We're not able to address it with them. So then there goes that client, but actually you're doing them a disservice by that because you're keeping that pattern alive for them.
My gosh. Yeah, and that's something where you mentioned courses, and obviously the course corrector was born working with course creators back in the glory days for the courses, which right now it's I have my prediction is that courses will come back eventually, soon, sooner than we think. But no, really what I'm thinking about that is I've worked with so many course creators who they have these target numbers and they go, okay, I want this many people to buy into my program. And when that target gets missed, you're right. It ultimately then just becomes about how it's another failure. It's confirming everything that they have subconsciously and unconsciously thought about themselves, right? And then it's about their enoughness. And this isn't actually to make them bad either. That's so, I think that the emphasis on the subconscious is that it is our body. It's our body and our mind working together, but we don't always know what's going on behind the scenes. And so when we feel that failure and the really awful feelings that we have been trying so hard to push away, to ignore, especially through our high achieving, through, consistently scaling, it's like a giant slap in the face. But just even thinking about that from the other perspective, because we talk about the reason that online courses aren't doing so well is because people have been burned before, because people have gone into courses where course creators have promised a bajillion and one deliverables and nothing gets met. And then the course taker is left feeling like, pardon my French, but shit. Right?
Yeah.
They sit there and they're like, well, now I feel unworthy. Now I feel like I didn't do something right. And they're also, I think something that's so important is course takers are coming into programs with all of these shoulds and these have tos. But it's not just course takers, it's any client that we might have regardless of where we find them. I'm thinking for my current listeners with LinkedIn, if you want to get high quality leads, then ultimately what it takes is holding that space for those leads so they can feel like they're being heard, so they can feel like they feel worthy enough to purchase whatever you're selling. And I think that what you said there is just like brain is just like mind blown. That's exactly what we need to be thinking about. Now, I want to touch on you mentioned somatic work and kind of regulating the self. If one of our listeners or any of our listeners are high achievers and they're stressed, they can see their dysregulation. They're not really sure what trauma they have, but they know that there's some work that they need to do. And, there's the very typical responses of like journal and it'll come up, but they're resistant towards like anything like that. What would you recommend they go do to start to take care of themselves or start to recognize what's been working in their subconscious?
So, I mean, journaling and all of that and meditating, I mean, I do all of that myself. They are extremely helpful, but the problem is that they cannot be helpful on their own. You cannot just sit down and try to journal and think that all these unconscious, invisible wounds are going to appear suddenly. It doesn't work like that. So, the my first invitation would be to start paying attention to what happens to their bodies when they think about scaling, right? I always ask this, I always say, what is the kind of best situation, best outcome when you launch, right? And then people say different things. And I always say, okay, now time that by 10 or like triple it or whatever. Go as far as you can to see where you become dysregulated, because that's usually that's as far as your lineage have gone in terms of, or as close as it felt safe for you to go. So you need to pay attention to your body. It's not just about your mind. We have brilliant minds, but it is not about that. So it's about knowing when you become agitated or when you feel like you're going to freeze. Dissociation is by itself is not a negative thing. It's our body's way of protecting us, but it becomes a problem when it becomes our default position. So coming back to being a bit more present and really checking in with yourself. Like, what is happening? What's happening with your health? What's happening with your body when you think about expanding? What happens to your sort of, I see this a lot around throat and your chest. You have people start to almost have symptoms that are similar to a panic attack when they think about success. Who would
Hmm.
have thought when you think about expansion? So it is just, and understand that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It just means that you need to rewire some of these patterns. And also, creating safety in your body is you can take small steps to somatic work by registering kind of your senses a little bit, right? So when you, before you go into this big sale or this big presentation or whatever it is, you need to bring your body, like allow your body to see that you're safe. And that's not by just telling yourself, oh, we're safe, we're good, or we're going to do great. No, that's not going to work. The way your body works and how you can bring safety is by senses, not by talking about it. So you need to activate your senses to for your body to register that you're safe, you are in. So then you're constantly thinking about regulating your nervous system, especially when it's situations such as marketing yourself or talking about yourself.
Mm.
Does that make sense? Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
no, that does answer my question. I was even thinking about a little weird practice that I do, and this is like me actually. Speaking of where we start to freeze up and the messaging not always coming through. I had a really interesting conversation the other day with someone who was like, "You need to put more of yourself and share more of yourself in your business." And I was like, "Oh, you're right. It's true, but it's like where we freeze up and it just happens." So, something that I've started doing when I start to get dysregulated is I'll take lavender because, essential oils and it's really great, and I like put a little bit on my wrist and I'll just go like this and I'll smell it and it helps me calm down before something big. And that's like a personal thing that I've done that really just helps like regulating. Do you have any other like tips and tricks for stuff like that?
Yeah.
Because yeah,
So
yeah.
exactly what you're saying is about activating your senses, right? So you're activating your sense of smell. So
Mhm.
I would usually encourage people to just take a couple of minutes and activate all the senses from smell to maybe sipping water or, activate your sense of taste. Look around, just allow your eyes to register that you are safe. And so these are the things that you cannot communicate to your body. Your body needs to experience it.
Mhm.
And touch, either kind of like, because a lot of the times also I know that people when they touch their hands, their own hands or whatever, it feels very strange to them. That's how disconnected they are from their body. So, and then paying attention to how they're sitting, their weight on a chair, or bringing themselves to the present moment, because every time we are thinking about the past or the future, which is what most people are doing,
Yeah.
we are in our heads. We're not in our bodies. When you come and, when you drop into your body, you cannot help but to stay in the present moment, which means that you feel how you're sitting on a chair or whether your skin feels like tingly or whatever else, right?
Mhm.
So think about this. Every time you are in your head, you're either getting stressed or you're feeling down because you're either in the past or the future, right? And every time you're able to bring yourself to the present moment and activate your senses, you drop into your body. And when you do that, your body registers it immediately as safety. So it understands that, oh, okay, we're not in 100 years ago where things were unsafe, right?
Yeah.
It understands that we are in the present moment, and in the present moment, you're safe. The other thing I would say, if you're, I know meditation is great and a lot of people do mindfulness and that's all good as well. But sometimes when you're really agitated, your body might be in fight or flight, right? So you're not in freeze. So you cannot go and immediately sit down and meditate. So you need to actually discharge. You need to kind of move your body.
Mhm.
And this will all come once you connect to your body a little bit so you see what it needs. Does it
Mhm.
need to kind of move around? Because sometimes when you move around, your body registers, oh, you're not, there's no threat. You don't need to make yourself small. We are safe. So that's a good message to your body as well.
Yeah, that's really lovely. I like that. I think even when I get thrown into like a not my freeze, but I tend to be more flighty. But I'll actually go for a walk and it's I like to think of it. I actually had somebody explain it to me who was also a psychologist that when you're walking, your feet are going up and down, your right and your left feet, and it's actually activating both sides of your brain. And what it's creating is an equilibrium so that you're actually calming yourself while walking, which I think is so interesting. So like that's why a lot of therapists ultimately end up recommending walking. It was a very interesting conversation that I had one time that I was like, oh, I'm gonna store that nugget in my back pocket when I have a really big meeting and I feel like running. I'm
No, I
like,
mean that's a very good one because a lot of people again they go into freeze. And the reason for that is, I mean, I know you may not recognize that as freeze, but I will tell you that a lot of what you experience is probably functional freeze
oh
as well.
no.
Because if you think about it, when we were small and something like dangerous or scary or whatever would happen, a lot of us would like freeze and make ourselves small or go hide and look or whatever. So that's how your body understands that you're not safe. So by contrast, if you were to move your body and let it know that actually we are safe to move about, then your body understands that it's not a repetition of what has happened in the past.
Oh
You
my
know what
gosh.
I mean?
So it's yeah, it's like a breaking up of the sequence of events that your body is expecting. That's awesome.
Yeah. So when you freeze, when you're sitting down and you're scrolling or you're watching other people's lives on TV rather than living your own,
Yeah.
those are the kind of dissociations that they come as a result of us being in freeze. So even during that time, if you were to get up and move and start like shaking and taking deep breaths and then, breathing out and shaking your body and, that automatically lets your body know that you're safe to move about, right? So then immediately your body goes into regulation. You're not in freeze anymore, you're safe. So from that place, you can then do amazing things.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I even that what just came to mind too is have you ever watched the show Ted Lasso at all?
Not no.
Okay, okay. Well, so for any one of my listeners that have seen Ted Lasso, there's this one character that when she gets anxious before, speaking or doing something big, she'll go look in the mirror and stretch herself really big and pretend to be a lion. And I even think like that is such an interesting breaking up of a very typical body response too, of like, okay, I can move about, I can be something big, and then going and disrupting the pattern, which that was just my little nerd out moment. Last thing I kind of really wanted to touch on is you had mentioned intergenerational trauma, and we talked about it in terms of money. I guess how does intergenerational trauma show up in business when we're attempting to get visible?
Well, part of visibility is using your voice.
Hmm.
So you're supposed to be speaking about things that I just give you this is the simplest example. Talking about yourself, about your offer, about what you're doing, and how amazing you are at doing that, which is something that's very uncomfortable, especially again for women, because just a simple example would be that for a woman to be that comfortable speaking about how great she is, that didn't end well. The first thing would be, oh, so and so is so full of themselves, or who did they think they are, or and again, please, when I say these things, understand that these are not the things that we're actively thinking about. This is in our patterns programming. It's encoded inside our bodies, right? So when it comes to visibility, when it comes to talking about ourselves, when it comes to allowing our magic shine, that's also very dangerous, like to actively invite people to pay attention to how amazing we are. Think about that for a moment, because everything, even today, everything that we understand about safety is around being invisible. When you go for a walk at night by yourself, you automatically want to not bring attention to yourself, be invisible. Or, I mean, that's happening right now. Or if I see this a lot, especially in a corporate world, that women kind of when they try to speak softly because they don't want to be accused of being aggressive or angry, or, I mean, I'm not using the word, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Hmm.
So it's, these are the things that are actually happening today. So we're not even talking about intergenerational kind of trauma.
Just today.
today. And of course, in the past, being visible was dangerous. It was dangerous. We would put ourselves out there to be taken advantage of, to be attacked, to be whatever else, right? And if you think about it, there was a reason why women back in the days, they would be, if you think about like the hunting and all of that, men would go out and hunt and fight and everything, and women would kind of be creating a family or bring up children or whatever. And this is, I'm talking about the Stone Age, right? So I'm not
Mhm.
now, but this is how we are wired to know that we have to be small. We have to make ourselves small. Don't have such a loud voice. Do not talk about ourselves too much as if we are full of ourselves. I mean, these are very tangible examples that are still happening to this day. So we are constantly programmed to be safe only when we are smaller, when our voice is not as loud, when you don't stand out too much, and when you don't have that much money, because then you're not, no man is going to want to marry you or whatever else that was a
Mhm.
big thing back in the day.
Yeah, so it's all just about perceived safety at the end of the day.
Is all about perceived safety because our beautiful mind and our beautiful bodies are programmed only to keep us safe. So they are very clever in doing that. So it has nothing to do with us not being good enough or not being brave enough or not being confident enough. And this comes up over and over again. Not being hardworking enough. You are all of those things. It's just that you just have been programmed this way, and your body and your mind is so amazing that it's just trying to protect you. That's all. So you just need to learn how to upgrade that old programming, and then you will have a whole different experience, and you experience the reality in a different way.
Mm, that's amazing. And when it comes to getting visible, because I think that's such a huge piece in marketing, especially in talking about selling and all of that stuff. So, if I wanted to feel like I was confident enough to go out into the marketing world and give like a speech or something, right? Or feel like I was confident enough in my messaging to spread the word and to sell, other than doing like just somatic work and focusing on the body, how do you like tie the mind in so you can feel like you're confident enough in the moment? Like where is that identity shift found?
Ah, it's where your body and your emotion goes, your mind will follow,
Mm,
right? So you don't need to, this is what, but it's not the other way around, right? So
mm,
when your body feels regulated and you feel in harmony with yourself and you don't feel like there is a threat, then you can train your mind to get on board as well. And it's not about confidence, right? I know a lot of people who are extremely confident, but they are operating from a trauma adaptation strategy and they don't know it, right? So the idea is to actually allow yourself to play around with this idea that how good and how amazing can it get for you, and see how far you can go with that, because I promise you there's going to be a ceiling and there is going to be some
mm,
sort of some sort of, and I think the my invitation is for people to, the same way that you are thinking about the strategies and all the things you need to do, to give as much importance, if not more, to what is happening, who is in the driver's seat, who is the CEO of your kind of business. Is it that wounded child that you're not paying attention to? Is it the rejected teenager? Is it, who is it? And then once you have that understanding, when you're understanding different parts of yourself, then you can bring in that kind of more aligned, more integrated, the adult, the CEO part of yourself can sit at the driver's seat.
mhm,
But most of the time, that's not the case. So I'm just inviting you to think about that and give these kind of work the same importance, if not more, when it comes to your business, when it comes to growing your business, because your business will only go as far as you're able to take it.
mhm. I love that. I love that. Just letting the mind follow. I think that also gives the brain a bit of a break too from doing all of its amazing, glorious work. Instead, it's almost just like a process of trusting the body, right? That's amazing. I really love that. And I'm a big sucker for parts work. I think parts work is amazing. So I'm so glad you shared that as well. Where can people find you? What do you have going on in your world? What should people know about? Yeah, where do you live?
There is obviously my website, faryabarlas.com. I work with people on a one-to-one basis, but I also have a group program that I launch every 2 months. So it's an 8 weeks program for people to be able to access everything and to be able to experience this firsthand. My program is called Success Rewired, and it's an 8 weeks program. So you will be able to find information and details on my website.
Yeah, and we'll absolutely have that in the show notes so you can find that. I cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast. This was everything amazing and wonderful, and I know that my listeners are going to take away so much. So thank you.
That's my pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Course Corrector Confidential. I hope you're walking away with action steps that leave you feeling clear, confident, and ready to take on LinkedIn in a way that connects with your audience and drives results. If you want to connect further, head to thecoursecorrector.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave a review or share it with a friend, getting the word out there.